Autumn 1942. As the Allies girded themselves for grand offensives, a new and terrible specter haunted the strategic councils. In the smoke-filled briefing rooms of Washington, London, and Moscow, a single, chilling whisper circulated: the atomic bomb. Intelligence reports increasingly indicated that Nazi Germany was making significant strides in its quest for nuclear weapons. And at the very heart of this sinister program lay a remote, seemingly impregnable Norwegian factory. This plant, Norsk Hydro at Vemork, Norway, held a unique and terrifying distinction. It was the only facility in the world capable of producing heavy water in substantial quantities. Heavy water, or deuterium oxide, was a critically important component for German nuclear research, serving as a neutron moderator, essential for sustaining a chain reaction within an atomic pile. Without it, German scientists could not produce the plutonium required for a nuclear device. The fate of the free world, therefore, hung precariously on a single objective: to halt heavy water production at Vemork. But how? The plant was a fortress, literally carved into a plateau high in the Norwegian mountains, surrounded by deep gorges and perpetually blanketed in snow. It was one of the most challenging sabotage targets of the entire war, buried deep within occupied territory. A direct aerial assault would be prohibitively risky and likely ineffective against such fortified structures. A parachute drop in such treacherous terrain, suicidal. Somewhere in London, within the Special Operations Executive (SOE), Colonel John Skinner Hutton, an expert in Norwegian operations, stared intensely at a large-scale map. He understood that the task was, by any conventional measure, impossible. But desperation, as history often proves, is the mother of audacious innovation. And so, an extraordinary decision was made. A small, elite group of Norwegian commandos, meticulously trained by British specialists, would covertly infiltrate the enemy's stronghold. Their mission: to destroy the heavy water plant, vanishing into the snow as silently as they had appeared. With those words, the impossible transformed into a tangible military objective. In the secret training camps across Britain, a team was meticulously assembled, tasked with achieving what seemed to be a fantastical feat: to derail Hitler's atomic ambitions. Deep within the desolate training grounds of Scotland, amidst the swirling mists and rugged mountain slopes, a small cohort of Norwegian volunteers underwent an unforgiving regimen. Their mission was shrouded in such profound secrecy that even they were not fully briefed until the 11th hour. They had been handpicked for their extraordinary endurance, their intimate knowledge of Norwegian language and terrain, and their unyielding commitment to the cause. Each man understood that he might very well be sacrificing his life. The project bore a chillingly understated code name: Gunnerside. Initially, even seasoned SOE officers harbored profound doubts about the operation's chances of success. Previous attempts, most notably Operation Freshman, a parachute-borne assault by British sappers, had ended in unmitigated disaster. 2 gliders crashed, and those few who survived the impact were captured and brutally executed by the Nazis. This tragedy underscored the mortal peril of the task and solidified the resolve to entrust the fate of the next attempt exclusively to Norwegian commandos. The man chosen to lead this audacious endeavor was Joachim Ronneberg, a young but exceptionally resolute and capable lieutenant. His team comprised other distinguished Norwegians, including Knut Haugland. Their objective: to infiltrate a highly sensitive area, bristling with German patrols and formidable defenses. For months they meticulously rehearsed sabotage tactics, handling specialized explosives, and mastering survival in brutal Arctic conditions. They painstakingly studied smuggled blueprints of the Norsk Hydro plant at Vemork. Every inch of their planned infiltration route, every critical pipe, every window of the factory, all were committed to memory. They developed 2 primary infiltration strategies. Plan A: attempt a covert entry into the factory through its main gate, potentially utilizing a disguised lift used by local workers. Plan B: execute a perilous descent into the deep gorge below the factory, cross the treacherous frozen river, and then ascend the opposite cliff face to infiltrate the factory's basement, where the crucial heavy water electrolyzers were located. It was Plan B, a far riskier and seemingly suicidal approach, that ultimately appeared more viable. It demanded navigating a gorge hundreds of meters wide, then an arduous climb up sheer cliffs, followed by a stealthy penetration of a heavily fortified perimeter. Even the slightest misstep would spell certain death. In November 1942, Ronneberg penned a classified report to his superiors. The only way to cripple Hitler's nuclear program is to destroy the Vemork plant. Success will depend on absolute stealth, surgical precision, and overwhelming speed. By early 1943, the audacious plan had received final approval. Miles of steel wire, specialized explosives, mountaineering equipment, and Arctic-grade winter gear were meticulously assembled. Every piece of equipment underwent rigorous scrutiny, for in the unforgiving mountains, there was no margin for error. The civilian manufacturing industry, ordinarily focused on peacetime communications, now became an unwitting component of a covert military machine. Each worker involved knew only fragments of the larger plan, just enough to perform their specific task, but never enough to divine its true, overarching purpose. Somewhere within a secure warehouse in Britain, a small brass plate was affixed to a box of high explosive. It read, "Gunnerside, a heavy water. Top secret." The countdown to one of the most daring acts of sabotage in wartime history had begun. Winter 1943. The snow-swept expanses of Norway became the stage for one of the most ambitious and perilous operations of World War II. The mission: to obliterate the heavy water plant at Vemork. The daunting challenge: the factory's location, nestled within such severe and tightly controlled conditions, meant that the very journey to it was an extraordinary feat of engineering and endurance in itself. At the core of Operation Gunnerside lay an exceptional adaptation to the brutal natural environment and a mastery of partisan tactics that would soon cement their legendary status. Ronneberg's group, a compact force of 6 men, parachuted onto the vast Hardangervidda Plateau on February 16, 1943, several dozen kilometers from Vemork. They immediately confronted savage weather conditions: howling winds, subzero temperatures, deep snowdrifts, and blinding blizzards. This was no mere trek. It was an utterly exhausting march demanding superhuman stamina and unparalleled survival skills. Each painful step forward represented a triumph over the relentless element. They were met by 6 Norwegian saboteurs from the advance Swallow team, who had been pre-inserted for reconnaissance and to establish a base camp. Together, they formed the United Strike Force. To reach the factory, they needed to traverse desolate mountain ranges, utilizing skis as their sole means of transport. 4 days, they covered immense distances, meticulously avoiding German patrols and any local inhabitants who might unwittingly compromise their mission. Every movement was precisely calculated, every hiding place meticulously chosen. The engineering in this context was not about construction, but about the flawless planning of their route, the meticulous selection of specialized equipment, and the rigorous rehearsal of infiltration tactics. They not only had to reach their target but do so completely undetected. Their chosen path wound along the steepest slopes and most perilous passes, precisely where the Germans would least expect human presence. Finally, at dawn on February 27th, the group reached the precipitous edge of the gorge that dramatically separated them from the factory. Their next challenge: to descend an almost vertical slope, cross the frozen Mana River, and then ascend the opposite cliff face to approach the factory from its less guarded rear, a route widely considered impassable. In the converted workshops where they underwent their final preparations, SOE engineers and Norwegian specialists worked in unison, often through the night. Everything was improvised, from the modifications to their equipment to their measurements and even their infiltration methodologies. "We were making it up as we went along," one engineer later admitted. Failure just wasn't an option. The precise application of explosives was paramount. Their goal was not to utterly obliterate the entire factory, but rather to surgically destroy its critically vital core, the electrolyzers responsible for producing heavy water. For this, they had to place the charges with pinpoint accuracy, ensuring the incapacitation of the specific equipment without causing excessive noise or damage that would instantly trigger a full alert. When the first teams began their descent into the gorge, every man held his breath. They painstakingly unwound ropes, dropping into the frigid darkness. 4 hours, the saboteurs navigated the impossible terrain, acutely aware of every creak and shift. Finally, they reached the bottom, crossed the frozen river, and began their arduous climb. It worked. They had conquered the engineering puzzle of access. Now they had to execute their primary objective in one of the most heavily guarded and dangerous locations on Earth, without the enemy ever discovering their presence. In a war rife with spies, submarines, and sabotage, secrecy was their ultimate weapon. Every order was coded. Every operation was disguised as a mundane communications exercise. Even Churchill himself referred to it in his personal notes with deliberate vagueness. Operation Gunnerside had transitioned from a daring theory to a terrifying reality. The Allies had launched a precision strike to cripple Hitler's atomic ambitions. Now they had to achieve their goal directly under the Nazis' very noses. Late winter 1943. The wind whipping across the Vemork gorge was sharp and biting. Men in their Arctic gear hunkered down near the factory walls as the faint morning light glinted off the frozen snow. What appeared sound on paper often failed spectacularly in the unforgiving conditions of the field. The Gunnerside saboteurs learned faster than most. Every obstacle, every German patrol encountered, every treacherous rock face taught them vital lessons in the brutal language of the relentless landscape. The initial attempts to penetrate the fortified perimeter were fraught with peril. The saboteurs first considered using the railway line that led directly to the factory, but it was heavily guarded. They then activated Plan B. The descent into the 500-meter gorge, the precarious crossing of the frozen river, and the arduous ascent of the opposite cliff face seemed like madness. Yet, it was precisely this route that was the least protected. They knew the Germans considered it utterly impassable. During the clandestine night crossing of the Mana River, several saboteurs narrowly avoided falling through the cracking ice. The frozen surface groaned and splintered under their weight, but they held firm. Every cautious movement was a silent victory over the treacherous element. They painstakingly crawled up the snow-covered slopes, making optimal use of their minimal specialized equipment. Upon reaching the factory fence, they discovered it was not electrified, a small but utterly decisive stroke of luck. Infiltrating the factory itself demanded incredible precision and nerve. The main doors were securely locked, but one of the saboteurs, Knut Haugland, discovered a forgotten cable tunnel leading directly into the basement where the critical heavy water electrolyzers were housed. This was their lifeline in. Inside the factory, the small group split. One element took up positions to provide security, while the other began the perilous task of placing the explosive charges. All moved with ghost-like silence, avoiding the slightest sound that might alert the German guards. Once the charges were precisely set, Ronneberg lit the fuses. A muffled explosion followed. This explosion was a masterpiece of controlled demolition. It was powerful enough to decisively cripple the critically important electrolyzers, yet not so thunderous as to instantly trigger a full, factory-wide alarm. The precisely calculated detonations allowed the saboteurs to incapacitate the heavy water production equipment without causing extensive structural damage to other parts of the plant, which might have led to rapid repairs. They understood that mere superficial damage would be swiftly rectified. Their target was the complete and irreversible destruction of the key production machinery. After the detonations, a brief, tense moment of silence hung in the air, followed by the faint sound of German boots approaching. The saboteurs, having achieved their objective, executed a flawless exfiltration. They melted back into the night, leaving behind a crippled heart of the Nazi nuclear program. Despite an intense and immediate pursuit by German forces, Ronneberg's group managed to make a perilous escape to Sweden, traversing hundreds of kilometers across the unforgiving, snow-laden mountains. When general planners observed the intelligence reports regarding Vemork, they stopped dismissing Gunnerside as mere fantasy in their high-level meetings. The War Cabinet still spoke softly about the risks involved, but the technical intelligence papers, stamped, signed, and occasionally smudged with grease, began to look like blueprints for ultimate victory. The saboteurs who had once been regarded as idealistic dreamers were now acknowledged as essential. Their audacious infiltration, their precise demolition, and their brutal mountain trek had transformed an impossible idea into a cold, hard engineering reality. And on one damp morning in May, after receiving the final confirmed reports from Vemork, someone scribbled on a classified file in bold black ink, "Gunnerside, mission accomplished." The phrase was understated, yet for the first time, the elimination of Hitler's atomic bomb seemed possible. As the initial success of Operation Gunnerside resonated, the challenge shifted from execution to sustainment: how to prevent the Germans from resurrecting their heavy water production. Enraged and humiliated, the Germans immediately initiated repairs. However, specialized equipment was scarce and difficult to procure amidst the exigencies of wartime. By spring 1944, German efforts had brought the plant close to resuming heavy water production. The Allies were forced to consider extreme measures. Despite the inherent risk to the Norwegian civilian population, a decision was made to launch an aerial bombing raid on the Vemork plant. This was incredibly perilous, as precision bombing was a formidable task, and any miscalculation could lead to significant civilian casualties. On November 16, 1944, following a series of aerial attacks that had not entirely crippled the production facilities, the Germans decided to dismantle the remaining heavy water equipment and transport the critical heavy water stock to Germany. This marked another pivotal moment. But the Norwegian resistance was ever vigilant. Their intelligence network relayed crucial information about the train route transporting the heavy water containers and the ferry that would cross Lake Tinsjo. It was then that a new team, led by Knut Haugland, one of the original Gunnerside participants, received another deadly assignment: destroy the ferry. Under the cloak of night, explosives were meticulously placed on the SF Hydro ferry. The charges were precisely calculated to sink the ferry in the deepest part of the lake, ensuring that the precious heavy water would be irretrievably lost. On February 20, 1944, the ferry plunged to the bottom of the lake, taking its vital cargo with it. Coordination with Allied command was critical. Radio silence was maintained. Every signal went through secure lines. Schedules were synchronized with infiltration operations, ensuring that strikes occurred exactly when and where needed. Crews used subtle visual cues, lantern flashes, prearranged hand signals, to communicate under strict blackout conditions. One slip, one misunderstood signal, and the whole operation could unravel. Even with careful planning, the harsh environment tested the operatives relentlessly. Sudden blizzards and treacherous ice churned the mountain passes, threatening to expose teams. Crews worked through freezing nights, battling fatigue, frostbite, and the ever-present fear of discovery. Yet each successful act of sabotage, each hidden movement, was a triumph of ingenuity and endurance. These covert operations were more than just a feat of engineering. They were a profound demonstration of Allied coordination, daring, and ingenuity combined with the unwavering courage of the Norwegian resistance. Each hidden explosive charge, each act of sabotage, was a silent victory, denying the enemy crucial resources and ensuring that the success of the war was not just about boots on the ground, but also about the unseen, vital arteries of scientific and industrial power that were methodically severed. Once the initial sabotage at the Norsk hydro plant and the subsequent sinking of the heavy water ferry were accomplished, the Allies faced a new, enduring challenge: maintaining pressure on the German nuclear program and preventing its resurgence. Intelligence reports warned that German U-boats, reconnaissance aircraft, and frogmen could attempt to locate and destroy sections of the undersea supply line. Saboteurs posed a constant threat, and even natural hazards like shifting tides or sudden storms could sever connections. Allied intelligence and special operations engineers devised clever countermeasures. Remaining equipment and any sites where heavy water might be produced were meticulously monitored. Disinformation campaigns and double agents were employed to mislead the Germans about the true status of their nuclear program and to complicate any attempts to find alternative sources or production method. Special units meticulously tracked any shipments of materials that could be used for nuclear component production. Teams remained on constant alert. Divers inspected the pipelines daily, repairing minor damage before it became critical. Special units conducted underwater reconnaissance at night, checking for leaks, corrosion, or signs of tampering. Communications were tightly controlled. Even routine maintenance was disguised as regular naval operations. The resilience of Operation Gunnerside and the subsequent follow-up actions were a testament to meticulous planning and persistent vigilance. Despite desperate German attempts to revive their program, the Norwegian saboteurs and the wider Allied efforts successfully prevented the creation of a Nazi atomic bomb. Commanders later credited these efforts with decisively disrupting Germany's nuclear ambitions, proving that victory often relied as much on ingenuity and unwavering vigilance below the surface as it did on the courage of soldiers on the front lines. The success of Operation Gunnerside and its subsequent phases hinged not on construction, but on the masterful application of engineering principles for sabotage and the unparalleled command of natural environments. HS, human adaptation in inhospitable surroundings. This design did not refer to a flexible pipeline, but rather to the extraordinary flexibility and adaptability of the Norwegian saboteurs themselves. Their inherent ability to survive and operate in extreme Arctic conditions, their expert use of skis, mountaineering skills, and intimate knowledge of the local terrain were paramount. They became the flexible conduit that could penetrate through the enemy's defenses. SOE engineers trained them to leverage the landscape's advantages, remaining undetected and overcoming obstacles deemed impassable by conventional forces. Hamel, highly accurate military explosive logistics. This system did not involve steel pipes, but rather the precise logistics of explosives. The saboteurs utilized small, yet precisely placed, charges to surgically disable specific, critically important equipment, the electrolyzers. This allowed for maximum destructive effect with minimal noise and without causing excessive collateral damage that would have attracted immediate attention and hastened repairs. This system demanded unprecedented coordination, from aerial insertion to explosive placement and a rapid, unseen exfiltration. Every segment of this operational engineering underwent rigorous quality control, from the psychological resilience of each operative to the meticulous inspection of explosive devices. SOE engineers and officers monitored every detail, understanding that a single misstep could lead to months of delay in the war effort. Redundant plans and escape routes were always conceived to allow the system to continue functioning, even if parts of the team were compromised. The ingenuity of these operations lay not merely in their execution, it was in the profound way they reshaped the strategic landscape. Gunnerside allowed the Allies to cripple a vital enemy nuclear program on a scale previously unimaginable, averting a potentially catastrophic threat. By combining innovative tactics, precise operational planning, and daring deployment strategies, these operations became powerful symbols of wartime creativity that decisively tipped the balance in the Allies' favor. On the night of February 27, 1943, the first elements of Operation Gunnerside covertly deployed their plan, descending into the snow-laden Vemork Gorge. Utilizing hidden routes to evade German reconnaissance, the Norwegian commandos rappelled down the sheer cliffs, meticulously controlling their speed and the tension on their ropes to prevent falls or exposure. Each meter of descent represented hundreds of feet of risk, slowly lowering them towards the very heart of the enemy's most dangerous program. Meanwhile, deep within the basements of the Norsk hydro factory, engineer saboteurs worked under absolute blackout conditions to connect their explosives to the critically important heavy water electrolyzers. Every connection and every coupling was meticulously inspected. Any misalignment could lead to disastrous failure. Reconnaissance teams, working from the surrounding mountains, provided occasional overhead coverage to ensure that German patrols had no chance of discovering the ongoing operation, and radio silence was strictly enforced. The operation faced relentless natural obstacles: treacherous icy cliffs, strong currents in the frozen river below, and unpredictable subzero conditions that threatened to derail the entire plan. The commandos utilized specialized mountaineering gear, crampons, and ropes to maintain their stability and progress. Finally, they reached their target, placed the explosives, detonated them, and then vanished back into the night. The success of this deployment was a formidable combination of engineering mastery, in planning and execution, precise timing, and audacious bravery. Within hours of the explosion, the factory's heavy water production capacity was crippled, leaving German scientists without their crucial deuterium oxide. The profound secrecy of the mission ensured that the Germans remained largely unaware of the true extent and nature of this logistical marvel until the campaign was well underway, underscoring the vital role of innovation and stealth in modern warfare. Despite meticulous planning, Gunnerside's deployment and exfiltration faced relentless challenges. Sudden blizzards in the Norwegian mountains threatened to disorient and overwhelm the sabotage teams, while unpredictable sub-zero temperatures placed immense stress on their equipment and physical endurance. The commandos constantly monitored their route and their position, making crucial adjustments to their movement and rest periods to maintain the group's cohesion and operational integrity. Both during the infiltration and the escape, the teams contended with equipment failures, severe frostbite, and the constant threat of detection or pursuit. Each incident demanded immediate, often desperate, solutions, frequently carried out under the cover of darkness to maintain the operation's vital secrecy. Moreover, counter-sabotage remained a persistent concern. German reconnaissance had the potential to discover and disrupt their efforts, leading to constant evasive maneuvers and the use of natural cover. Communication between the teams, their command in the UK, and local Norwegian resistance contacts relied on secure, coded channels, ensuring coordination despite the extreme hazard. The teams worked tirelessly, often through long, freezing nights, to ensure the success of the mission and their safe return. By mid-1944, the combination of sheer ingenuity, unwavering resilience, and brilliant improvisation allowed Gunnerside to achieve consistent and decisive results, ultimately crippling the Nazi nuclear program. This stage dramatically demonstrated that beyond brilliant engineering and tactical planning, the ultimate success of Gunnerside depended entirely on human determination, resourcefulness, and the extraordinary ability to solve complex, life-or-death problems under the most extreme pressure imaginable. The success of Operation Gunnerside left an indelible mark on military history and strategic warfare. For the first time, a covert sabotage operation had been used to neutralize a key component of a weapons of mass destruction program, proving that strategic objectives could be achieved without large-scale conventional military engagements, by targeting an enemy's critical vulnerabilities. The operation not only decisively halted the German nuclear program but also established a powerful precedent for future special operations and intelligence-led interventions. The engineering innovations, the adaptive infiltration methods, the use of treacherous terrain as cover, and the precision demolition techniques became seminal case studies in military academies and special operations schools worldwide. Veterans of the operation later contributed their unique expertise to post-war intelligence agencies and even civilian engineering projects, applying lessons learned under combat conditions to improve reliability and efficiency. Beyond its profound technical and operational achievements, Gunnerside symbolized the extraordinary ingenuity and seamless collaboration between the Allied powers and the local Norwegian resistance. Engineers, intelligence officers, and soldiers worked together, bridging national and disciplinary divides, to overcome both natural obstacles and the relentless threats posed by the enemy. Today, the story of Gunnerside stands as a powerful testament to human creativity under pressure, vividly demonstrating how meticulously planned intelligence, daring special operations, and precise engineering can decisively influence the outcome of global conflict.